Hey everyone, it's me again. I'm Amber from the Power Center, and I'm here with my friend Preet, and we are going to be talking about meditation today. Just a quick on my background. I teach yoga classes. I've been teaching meditation for over 11 years. I work here at Duquesne. I've been here for 9 years, and this is one of my favorite classes to teach. And I'm just so excited to be sharing this with you. Preet, would you like to say anything about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Preet, and I work for the Center for the Student Wellbeing, and I work as a well-being coach and educator, and I also teach meditation, but I'm not as pro like Amber is my friend. She is a lot better than me. She's an expert at it, but I am learning in the process. So that's what I started working here last semester. So thank you, Amber.
Absolutely. That was so kind of you to say. But, with mindfulness and meditation, it is not one of those things where we progress on a linear trajectory. Some people, without even taking a single meditation or mindfulness class, understand fully what it is because they live in such a way that they're really connected with the present moment. And on the other side of that, no matter how much training we have, there are just days where it's impossible to focus. One would think that I've been teaching as long as I have and I'd be able to really just focus on something. But an example is this morning I was reading a grocery list, and it's almost like I forgot every word as soon as I read it. And if at the end of reading the list, I couldn't have told you more than 3 items that were on it. So sometimes we're just not present and we're not in the moment. We're not very mindful. And so it's one of those experiences that we just have to revisit with ourselves every day and see where we are and make that intention to be a little bit more mindful if we're feeling less grounded, or to rest in that mindful space if we happen to find ourselves there. So with mindfulness, and we use mindfulness and meditation a lot of times interchangeably, but with mindfulness as a practice, one way that we can experience that is by using our 5 senses. So it's finding space for ourselves to tune in to what it feels like temperature wise, how it feels to be sitting in a chair. What does the air smell like? What's the temperature? What am I seeing around me? What do I hear? And just tuning in with those to be present in the moment instead of caught up in our mind thinking about our to-do list or what we did yesterday or anything that doesn't involve the present moment. And that helps us to be in the moment and in the here and now. You can practice mindfulness using walking. You can use mindfulness as a tool while you're sitting or trying to de-stress. You can use eating as mindfulness, and we're going to visit all of those things today.
Amber, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So in my meditation experience, sometimes I have encountered almost a childhood would come back where there's a memory of, a smell would come back from the childhood, a memory. Is that still being mindful, but in your meditation experience, something will come back from way from the past?
That's a really good question because that happens quite a bit. So when we smell something, we're using our olfactory bulb, which is a part of our brain that processes smell. And that is closely associated with our memory recall. They're actually right next to one another in the brain. And so smelling things particularly does bring back memories of that smell. And, the smell of old books for some people might bring back, the first time they were reading or the first time they went to a library or what have you. We all have these signature scents that bring us back to different eras. And so your question, is this being mindful when we bring these memories up? It depends on your intent. So if your intent is to focus on the breath and just the breath, and then we start thinking about what we smell and the memories associated with it, then what we'd want to do is label that as our thinking thoughts and bring it right back to the breath. But we're going to
Okay.
practice a form of meditation today, being a mindful witness. And in that case, we're just watching our thoughts and seeing where they go. And if we're doing that kind of mindful practice, then that would absolutely be mindful. But above all, as long as we're being present and in the here and now, not riding the wave of our thoughts and going wherever they take us, but just watching and observing and being present, then it is a form of mindfulness practice.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes. I guess sometimes we just kind of, I heard somewhere that it's common to have a past come up, but we have to come back to the breath. But sometimes if we are doing regular meditation, we get more in touch with our soul, and sometimes the past can creep up. In my particular memory was of a childhood. I used to hang off of trees with my cousins in India. We would like be hanging because it's a tropical country, and I just remember it's called a jamun tree. We would jump up on a jamun tree and like play around on a farm, and just was pleasant. And just the whole scene came back, when you're like, I was like 8 years old or 7 years old. So yeah.
And that's so lovely. And sometimes we need to gift ourselves the time to just rest in that memory
Mhm.
and feel those feelings. So, as a strict practice, um, sometimes we need to break that rigidity and just rest in a memory, some as a gift to ourselves for being present
Right.
for memory. So it's not a bad thing that that happens, and sometimes that happens more often than not. It really just depends on what you're trying to get out of the mindfulness experience for that day
Yeah.
that you're doing. But I would never tell somebody put that out of your mind and return to the breath, especially if it's something that feels like a nice little island to be on for a moment.
Right. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for answering my question. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you for asking. All right, you're up.
So, okay, meditation and becoming aware. When I talk to students, especially those who are new, and I always ask them, oh, what's their experience of meditation? Have they ever done meditation? What do they think of meditation, just to get their idea? And they always say, oh, it's something like out of body experience, or if it's being at peace or calmness, you immediately go into meditation and you have this calmness and peace. I said it's part of it is correct, but I said but meditation is more than that. Meditation is um, being aware of the present moment, being here and now, not dwelling on the future or dwelling on a past. And like I give an example of my memory, it was the past. So coming back to being aware of what's happening right now and let the process unfold. Maybe in that process, when things unfold naturally and organically, you can have the experiences from the past. But and I also talk about, before I get them into the meditation journey, if we do a mindfulness kind of exercise, I do tell them in advance that it's normal to have thoughts. Thoughts will come up. It's not like you just close your eyes, all of a sudden your mind will go blank and you won't have any kind of thoughts. Everyday thoughts, ideas, images, visuals, they will pop up, because that's the job of the mind. It's to think. We emotions are also very common. One can have emotions of peace and calmness, pleasant emotions. However, having emotions that are perhaps not so calming, anxiousness or hurt or anger, resentment, all sorts of, I can sit here and list number of emotions, but I tell my students, it's really nothing to worry about. Just be present with the emotion, breathe through the emotion, make space for what's happening, and that there are part of your meditation journey. And with feelings and emotions, I see them personally as detoxifying the psychic, our mind, especially if something we've been holding on, in our soul and our spirit for, let's say, a long time, and it really didn't have the avenue to release. Sometimes these emotions, if they get intense, it's just the body's way of detoxifying the emotion. And bodily sensation, such as warmth, twitching, um, pulsing of different parts of your body, is very common. It's nothing to be afraid of, especially if they don't know what's happening in the body. And you just kind of guide them through meditations. I have seen students get worried. Perhaps they don't know how to hold that sensation, especially things like with anxiety, when you have kind of unpleasant sensation in your belly, or maybe your head is pulsing with a headache. And once again, in my meditation journey, I see that as a process for body to destabilize itself, because we live so much in our head that when the body has a chance to settle down and become calm and being aware, it doesn't really know what exactly is happening. So there are all these sensations and feelings, and there's a rippleness going on in the body. It's just the body balancing itself, detoxifying itself, and one has to kind of breathe through those sensations. The only time I say, if something gets so intensified, or it becomes so unpleasant, that I may ask a student to come out of meditation, because I don't want them to feel traumatized by the experience, especially if someone has trauma history. It can be very hard for a certain group of population, especially those who have experienced some form of bodily injury, harm, sickness. So those body sensation, you just have to be aware of your own sensitiveness to what's happening in the body. So thoughts, feeling, physical sensations, visuals are very common. Sound is another thing I wanted to mention. Sound of your own body and your own soul, the inner sound. Sometimes when I personally meditate, I can hear my own heartbeat or pulsing, especially in my ear. I don't know if there's a nerve that's running from, I think, what kind of nerve is that, Amber? Maybe you know, like it runs from your neck kind of all the way down to your
Your
belly.
your vagus nerve is
Yeah,
goes like from here down into your organs.
yeah. So sometimes I can hear my own pulse, or my own, just the sensation. And before I thought, oh my God, what is happening? Is there something wrong with my body? Or is it these sounds of the body okay? But they are perfectly normal part of the experience. It's just that you're more aware, and usually we are not aware of these things that are happening in the body. So what do you say, Amber? What do you think about that?
Oh, it's very true. I mean, I don't know if this is your experience or not, but oftentimes when people report being sick or feeling sick, it's at
Mhm.
nighttime, while they're in bed. And we feel sickest at nighttime. And it's not because it's nighttime, it's because we're in bed, the lights are off, we don't have anything to distract ourselves.
Mhm.
So all we have is a sensation within our body. So if you wake up with um, an upset stomach, it always feels worse than if you had that same upset stomach during the office days, because we can distract ourselves from how we're feeling.
Mhm.
And so that's on a big scale, but on a smaller scale, because we're so distracted, we don't always notice things until it's too late, or until it gets worse and worse and worse. So by checking in with our bodies, checking in with how we feel physically, we might notice things too that are a little bit out of balance. For example, in a yoga class, the idea of yoga, and we're going to talk about this later, but the idea of yoga is that you're connecting your mind and your body, you're listening to what your body has to say. So when you're in a
Mhm.
certain pose, you're paying attention to your body as a whole. How do your hands feel and your feet and your hips and your spine, all of those things.
Mhm.
And it's a great time to take inventory. As I was doing downward facing dog last night, I noticed like, wow, my wrist really hurts. And I wouldn't have noticed
Mm.
that otherwise, because it's not bad enough that I would, go to the doctor or anything. It's just like, oh wow, my wrist really hurts today. What was I doing to cause that? Did I fall on it? Like, and it opens up those conversations with ourselves, but it helps us to stay as healthy as we can because taking these silent moments of presence to check in with our physical self can really help us to avoid future suffering by from ignoring things
Mhm. Mhm.
and then
I
it becomes
agree.
worse.
I agree. It's a wonderful way to get to know yourself when you have that inner awareness, to de-escalate your body, calm it and balance it. Because studies have shown, meditation helps with, chronic issues. The only reason it becomes chronic is over time is because we don't pay attention, and finally the body gets our attention. And basically chronic diseases are a form of inflammation in the body. So meditation and mindfulness practice is a way to de-escalate the body, rebalance the body, detoxify the body, or not just not our body, even our mind. And it will lower inflammation. If we lower inflammation, we lower the chances of getting sickness and disease. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That awareness of all of those things are very, very important in long-term well-being. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. So now we're going to actually get into a practice for ourselves. And the practice that I've chosen today is called mindful witness practice because, as Preet was saying earlier, checking in with your body sensations, your thoughts, and your emotions. Don't feel bad. Our minds are meant to wander. Our minds are meant to think all the time. That's why we don't get hit by cars when we cross the street because we're being aware of what's around us. And we need that awareness. But when we practice mindfulness and we set the intent to be present, we want our mind to be focused on one thing and one thing only. So as we go through this practice, mindful witness practice is something that you could do if you have 3 minutes or 30 minutes. And it's the act of just paying attention to what we're doing in this moment, here and now. And if our mind wanders, we'll notice that it wanders. We'll notice where it goes. We'll label that and follow it. Um, but we're just paying attention to what we do in this space and time. So it's almost like we're watching ourselves from above if we had a lens into also what we were thinking. Okay? So I want you to find yourself in a comfortable seated position. Make sure you move yourself forward and back, side to side, to ensure that you are balanced. We want to honor the curvature of our spine. So we allow our spine to curve. We don't want to be sitting as straight as a board, but we do want to be sitting up, lifted, almost as if we have a string from the crown of our head pulling us up. So we're lifting our rib cage, creating a little bit of space in our torso to allow for deep breathing. We close our eyes and bring our tongue to the roof of our mouth. Your hands can sit on your thighs or wherever they're most comfortable. And now breathe. There's no right or wrong way to breathe. You can breathe shallowly, you can breathe deeply, find something in between. But right now, you're just breathing in the way that feels best to you. We're not forcing anything. With every exhale, we allow our body to relax, allow ourselves to get a little bit heavier on our seat, but we're still being lifted through that string coming through the crown of the head. And we focus on the breath and how our body feels as we breathe. We're bringing our witness or focus to how the body feels as we inhale. And now we focus on how the body feels as we exhale. With every exhale, we're pushing our to-do list and our memories of what we did earlier today farther and farther away from us. Just you and your breath and your body in this moment. As we release our focus from our breath, we begin to focus on our feet. How do our feet feel against the floor in our shoes? Wiggling our toes, we feel what it feels like as each toe moves. Noticing the bottoms of our feet and even our ankles as we move our toes. And we bring our awareness up our legs, focusing on how our legs feel in this moment against the seat. Knees are slightly bent, hips are slightly bent. And we bring our awareness up to our torso, keeping our spine straight but curved, lifting through the ribs as we inhale, relaxing as we exhale. And just taking note of how our torso feels. Maybe we notice some tightness in the back, through the chest. We move our awareness to our arms as a whole and our hands. We allow our shoulders to drop away from our ears. We just feel our arms in the here and now. Maybe our hands are against our thighs. Maybe our shoulders feel a little tense. We just notice. And finally, we move our awareness to our neck and our face and our head as a whole. We take note, is there tension in the forehead? Maybe we're squeezing our jaw. We feel the air as we inhale through our nose and exhale through our nose. And then we change our awareness to our body as a whole. And this can be difficult. Oftentimes we're used to focusing on one thing at a time. But for the next few moments, I'd like you to just breathe and focus on the sensation of your body as a whole, your legs and your arms at the same time. For the remainder of the mindful witness practice, we're focusing on our mind, and our thoughts, and where they go. We want to try not to ride those thoughts on tangents, but rather just be aware of what we're thinking and when. But from here, we bring our focus back to the room that we're in, the sounds that we hear. You can wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. gently bring yourself back into this space and open your eyes when you're ready. Take your time. And that was a basic mindful witness practice where we just focus on the here and now, what's going on, what's happening in our mind, and we just brings a level of curiosity into how we are in this moment. And sometimes we notice things about ourselves, or we might notice that our thoughts tend to gravitate to a specific area. Sometimes as we think about our body, we might notice tension that we didn't notice before. And it's a really great way to just touch base with yourself every once in a while. If you only have 5 minutes, it's a great practice to do. And if you have more time, you can spend more time in it.
Can I share my experience,
Oh,
Amber?
absolutely. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I noticed in my body, like when we were guiding through, thank you so much for the practice, but I noticed like parts of my body are so warm and were hot, and the other parts were so cold, like my feet are extremely cold, but my hand and my upper body is fusing with like heat. And I also noticed like, my upper neck was hurting, I was trying to, like my back of my head, different, it was just nice to experience those different sensations and being aware that even my chest kind of felt a little heavy, and then I noticed I was taking in deeper breaths, even though you said just let the breath be natural, but I felt like I had to take an extra breath to kind of calm the body, since I guess there's some stress in the body.
And it's funny, it's breath is like the word posture. So, the second I say posture in a room, everybody straightens up. And even myself included. I knew I was going to say the word posture. So I was like, oh, I better sit up straight while I talk about posture. So we all do it. But whenever I bring up the word breath, whether we're meditating or we're just talking about breath work, we generally tend to just start breathing a little bit more deeply. When we're paying attention to our breath, we realize like, oh, I have been breathing really shallowly. But sometimes it's not comfortable to go straight to deep breaths. It might be a little bit too much for the system right away. But I appreciate your experience. And I would like to comment about your feet being really cold. Sometimes when we're in a seated position, since we're bent at the hips, we don't have as much innervation to the feet, and the blood flow isn't as much as it would be as if we were standing or even reclining. And that's why in meditation, it's good, especially if we're going to be in that space for a longer time, to be seated with the knees slightly lower than the hips to allow for more blood flow. And that will help your feet be warmer. So if you notice that your feet are always cold like that while you're in a seated position, one thing you could do is slide out to the end of your chair and lean back a little bit, and then bring your feet underneath the chair. And that can help you to just increase the blood flow to your legs. Because sometimes when we sit, depending on the chair and how we're built, it just cuts some of that circulation off.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. You always have such good questions and experiences. I'm happy that you share them with us.
And can I share one more comment?
Please do.
Yeah, so other thing I noticed is our breathing is a reflection of our mind. I notice when our mind is racing, our breathing is faster and shallower. And when the breathing becomes slower and softer, the mind is more tamed and like relaxed. So I always say that breath is a reflection of what's going on in the mind.
It really is in a lot of different ways. As long as you're not running, like unless you're exercising.
Yes.
A Unless you're exercising, that's a really good indication, because as we get bogged down, we might not be nervous, we might not be stressed, but when we get caught in a routine and we're just not being very mindful, our breath tends to be very shallow and very low. That's a great
Yes.
observation. So we were talking about mindful breath, mindful awareness, and sometimes some people find it really hard to be seated and practicing mindfulness or meditation. And that's where yoga really is helpful, because yoga is a union of the mind and the body. And we could do a seated yoga mind body practice. What we meditated on before was kind of like that. But maybe you're more of a movement based person, so you'd like to take a yoga class. That's a great way to bring awareness to your body, where it is in space as you move, and be aware of how you feel. It's a great way to check in while going through motions. However, I'd like to point out that when we take a yoga class, especially here in the United States, you're going to find a different scene, all the way from just fitness yoga, like stretching before you go into running or things like that, all the way to a very deep spiritual practice of yoga, and all points in between. And there's no right or wrong way to do yoga. In fact, all of the asana practices, like the downward facing dogs or the crow pose or the pigeon pose, all of those are arbitrary and made up. Somebody made these motions up, and really the object of them is to bring our focus to our body and to make that connection as we go through different motions. That'll help us balance, and it also helps us to calm ourselves before a seated meditative practice. So in many lineages, a family's yoga practice is their own, and what they do to bring themselves into a more peaceful state before they enter meditation, so that their muscles don't spasm and so that they feel fatigued enough to stay seated. But I'd also invite you to try to find your own yoga, your own way of connecting your mind and your body. So maybe doing yoga stretches or the asanas in a traditional yoga practice aren't for you, but maybe you're a runner. You could make running your yoga by turning it into a mindful practice. So as you're running, rather than listening to music and distracting yourself, you're being here now, listening to your body, listening to your breath, paying attention to how it feels when your foot strikes the pavement and what the scenery is around you. Always look at the scenery around you, especially if you're running in a place with people and cars. That's always good to be aware of those things. But we can make it even more mindful by paying attention to where our thoughts go, how our body feels. Or maybe you're a weightlifter. So you can make weightlifting your yoga, paying attention to your body as you go through the range of motion, noticing the changes in your breath and how it feels. You can make anything your yoga practice, as long as you're mindful about it and you're using it as a tool to become more present. So I welcome you to find the yoga that works for you.
Maybe it's pickleball.
Maybe it is pickleball. I think I'd be more mindful of not falling on the ground as I try to hit the ball. But
I think my true yoga is dancing. I like dancing.
I'm glad you brought up dance, because there are a lot of practices surrounding dance to help people ground themselves and to become more one between their body and mind. Dance is a really powerful tool for that.
Yes, yes. So now let's talk about mindful eating practice or eating mindfully, eating awareness. There are a number of ways you can go about calling that, but it's very hard to do in modern day lifestyle that we eat mindfully. I look at mindful eating as a sacred act done in a very settled way. Being able to truly embrace yourself in the process of, like, earlier, I believe one of our earlier sessions that we had, we were talking about, how did the food get here? Think about the journey of the food that took place all the way from, that little seed on the farm, people who cultivated the farming or germinate all those seeds, took care of the plants and the vegetables, the people who put it on a truck, brought it all the way across the state, and then got it to the grocery stores, people who took care of the food while in the grocery store, and then back into your car, people who drove the food to your home. We usually don't think about all the great things or all the great effort that goes into uh, our food. I also think about the journey of food, especially those who cook the food, who take care of the food. Who are those people who take care of the food? When it's done in a very loving way, and then we eat that food, it's going to nourish our body. One time I was listening to a yogi, and always talked about, he said, it's very important who cooks your food. If it's food is cooked in a very by a person who's angry or just has very negative state of mind and emotion, you might not enjoy their food much. But someone who cooks, who has taken great effort and care and done it with such act of love, you will notice that there's a difference between the food that was done with such care and awareness versus someone who just kind of threw the food on your plate. And that has happened to me. I believe I don't know what, I won't mention the chain restaurant that did that. I went there and I got my food, and they basically threw the food, like, the rice and the beans, and they just kind of slammed it. It just looked like kind of done in such a hurried and rushed way. It was not done mindfully. And when I started to eat it, I hated the taste of what I was eating. So I think for me, when I look at mindful eating, it's just not about the journey the food takes. It's also about people who cook your food. And you can always tell who cooked your food. And I know my friend Amber, she makes really good vegan food. And I know she takes such great care, and she's so aware and mindful of her cooking. And when I eat her food, I never had one bad experience, and it's just delicious. So be mindful of when you're cooking your food, because people who will be consuming it, be mindful of how you take care of your food, whether you have a garden, how often you feed it, all the nutrients, because essentially you are what you eat. You are made of the earth, all the molecules and minerals, everything that you are the earth. So I always say, love it and nourish it. And people who cook good food like Amber, love them and give them a big hug. So yes, that's my little thing on mindfulness eating.
I love that, but I would have to also confess that perhaps I'm not actually a good cook. I just care about how I do it, and that's what shines through, and it's not actually as good as you think it is. That's
Yes, I will always remember the food that we had over Friendsgiving. I ate that sweet potato with coconut in it for like 4 days. I loved it, and then you think about the person who made it. So it's very, very important. So I think there's so many factors that goes into the experience of mindfulness eating.
absolutely. And I like to take it a step further, because we can't always be mindful about like every morsel of food that we're eating, but rather we
Mhm.
can use eating as a time, if we're eating with other people, if we're lucky enough to have someone to share our meals with, then we might want to use our mindful eating practice rather than focusing specifically on the food, but focusing on engaging with the people around us. How often
Mhm.
are we in a dining situation where we might be eating with people, but we're not actually connecting with them? We're in the same room
Mhm.
eating the same thing, but we're not fully engaged because one of us or both of us, our minds are somewhere else. We're thinking about something else. And so we could use the mindful eating practice. We could move it to mindful dining, and really make that conscious attempt to engage with the people who are with us during this time. So many families use the mealtime as their sacred time and their family time together. And it's important to have dinner together, at least at this one time of the day, because everyone is so busy. And so it is important to use that time to engage and connect in a mindful way. So it might not always be specifically about the food. It might be French fry night or something that's not super exciting, but you can make it about the company and the people you're with. I mean, I like French fries. I don't know how to make them, so it's always a treat if I get them. But
You're absolutely right. Yeah, the company matters who you're eating with, you know. You are absolutely right, Amber. Like sometimes they're the, how much are we aware of people who we are eating with rather than being on our cell phone texting someone else, and that maybe that's the only time you get, maybe 30 minutes of your day, that's the only time you get to spend with them. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we'd like to just end on this note with this poem by Kaveriya Patel, and it's Dear You. Dear you, you who always have so many things to do, so many places to be, your mind spinning like a fan blade at a high speed. Each moment always a blur because you're never still. And I know you're tired. I also know it's not your fault. The constant brain buzz is like a swarm of bees threatening to sting you if you close your eyes. You've forgotten something again. You need to prepare for that, or else. You should have done that differently. What if you closed your eyes? Would the world fall apart without you? Or would your mind become open? Would your mind become the open sky? Flock of thoughts flying across the sunrise as you just watched and smiled. And on that note, I wish you a good day.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, Amber. I love that.
Absolutely.